There comes a pivotal moment in every parent's life when the relationship with their children begins to transform. For decades, you've poured your heart and soul into raising them, teaching them right from wrong, comforting them through tears, celebrating their victories, and sacrificing your own desires to ensure their well-being. You've been their rock, their guide, their unwavering support. But then, one day, something shifts. It might be subtle at first, a dismissive tone, a disregarded piece of advice, or an eye roll when you share your perspective. Or it might be more overt, condescending remarks, a sense that they view you as irrelevant, or even moments where they make you feel like a burden rather than a blessing. Whatever form it takes, the realization hits hard. Your children aren't showing you the respect you feel you've earned. And that stings deeply. If you're in this situation, you're not alone. Many parents, especially as they enter their later years, find themselves grappling with this painful shift. It's natural to feel a swirl of emotions, frustration at their ingratitude, sadness at the distance growing between you, or even anger at the unfairness of it all. You might be tempted to confront them, to list every sleepless night, every financial strain, every moment you put their needs above your own, hoping they'll finally see your worth. But here's a sobering truth I've learned through observation and experience. Reacting with bitterness or demands rarely restores respect. In fact, it often drives a deeper wedge between you and them, escalating tension and leaving you more hurt than before. Thankfully, there's a better path forward. A way to reclaim the respect you deserve without resorting to arguments, ultimatums, or resentment-fueled standoffs. It's not about forcing them to change, it's about shifting how you show up in the relationship. In this exploration, I'm going to walk you through 6 powerful strategies, practical, transformative steps you can take when your children don't respect you. These aren't quick fixes or manipulative tricks, they're profound adjustments in how you think, act, and respond, designed to reshape how your children perceive you. Some of these ideas might challenge your instincts, others might feel uncomfortably new, but if you stay with me through this journey, you'll discover a roadmap to re-establishing your place as a valued, respected figure in their lives. Not through force, but through quiet strength and intentional change. Let's dive into the first step. Step 1. Stop seeking their validation. One of the most common traps parents fall into, especially as they grow older and their children become independent adults, is the urge to chase their approval. It's an understandable impulse. After years of being the authority figure, the provider, the one whose word carried weight, the shift to a more equal or even reverse dynamic can feel disorienting. You might find yourself bending over backwards to please them, hoping that your efforts will earn their gratitude or admiration. Perhaps you agree to plans that inconvenience you, saying yes when your heart screams no. Maybe you suppress your own opinions to avoid rocking the boat. Or you go out of your way to accommodate their schedules, their preferences, their lives, always with the unspoken hope that if you just do enough, they'll see your value and treat you with the respect you crave. But here's the painful reality. The more you chase their validation, the less respect you're likely to receive. This isn't because your children are inherently ungrateful or cruel. It's a quirk of human psychology. Respect isn't a byproduct of self-sacrifice or people-pleasing. It's rooted in self-worth. When you constantly prioritize their needs over your own, when you silence your voice to keep the peace, you inadvertently send a message. Your feelings, your time, your dignity matter less than theirs. And once they internalize that idea, it becomes all too easy for them to take you for granted. To assume you'll always be there, always adjust, always yield. Let me paint a picture with a story. I once knew a woman named Margaret, a vibrant soul who'd raised 3 children single-handedly after her husband passed away young. In her prime, she was a force, independent, decisive, the kind of person who commanded a room without trying. But as her kids grew into adults and she entered her late 60s, something changed. She began deferring to them in ways she never had before. If they wanted her to babysit last minute, she'd cancel her plans. If they suggested a family gathering, she'd rearrange her entire week to make it work. When they spoke to her sharply or dismissed her ideas, she'd bite her tongue, telling herself, "I just want to keep the family close." She thought her sacrifices would strengthen their bond, that they'd appreciate her more for it. Instead, the opposite happened. Her children stopped seeing her as the strong woman she'd once been. They began to expect her compliance, her availability, her silence. Over time, they'd call less often unless they needed something, and their tone grew careless, even patronizing. Margaret confided in me one day, her voice trembling with hurt. "I thought I was keeping us together, but I feel like I've lost myself, and them." Her story stuck with me because it's a stark reminder of a universal truth. Respect begins with how you value yourself. So what's the solution? Stop acting like you need their approval to feel worthy. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. It means reclaiming your autonomy. Start by setting boundaries that honor your needs. If they ask for something that disrupts your peace, practice saying no with kindness but firmness. "I'd love to help, but that doesn't work for me this time." Speak your mind, even if they bristle at first. Share your thoughts on a matter, not to win their agreement, but to assert your right to be heard. Prioritize your well-being, whether it's keeping a commitment to yourself or simply taking time to rest. These small acts of self-respect might feel awkward initially, especially if you're used to putting them first, but they're powerful. They signal to your children that you're not a doormat, not a secondary player in your own life. And as they adjust to this new version of you, one who values herself, they'll begin to see you through a lens of respect, not obligation. This shift isn't instantaneous. Your children might push back, accustomed to the old dynamic. But consistency is key. Margaret eventually tried this approach. She stopped jumping at every request and started saying, "Let me think about it." Or, "I have plans, but we can figure something else out." At first, her kids were surprised, even annoyed. But over months, they began calling just to chat, not just to ask for favors. They started asking her opinion, listening when she spoke. Why? Because she'd taught them, through action, not words, that her presence was a privilege, not a given. You can do the same. Respect yourself first, and they'll follow suit. Step 2. Lead by example, not arguments. When your children dismiss your ideas, interrupt you mid-sentence, or treat you with a lack of regard, your gut reaction might be to push back. You might feel the urge to argue, to raise your voice, to remind them of all you've done. Decades of love, support, and wisdom they now seem to shrug off. It's a tempting response, born from a mix of hurt and a desire to reclaim your rightful place in their eyes. After all, shouldn't they recognize your worth without you having to fight for it? But here's a piece of wisdom that can save you years of heartache. Arguing rarely, if ever, wins respect. It might feel good in the moment to vent your frustration, but it's a fleeting victory that often leaves the rift wider than before. Think about it. When was the last time a shouting match or a heated debate convinced someone to genuinely value you more? Respect isn't a prize you claim through verbal combat. It's a response to the way you carry yourself, the quiet strength you exude, the dignity you maintain even when provoked. When you meet disrespect with anger, you hand them power. They see they can rattle you, push your buttons, dictate your emotions. And that, ironically, reinforces their belief that they hold the upper hand. I'll share a story about a man named Frank, a retired schoolteacher who'd spent his career commanding respect from students with a blend of firmness and warmth. In the classroom, he was unflappable. Students admired his calm authority. But at home, with his grown children, the dynamic was different. They'd brush off his advice about finances or health, interrupt him during family dinners, even chuckle when he tried to correct their behavior. At first, Frank fought back. "I didn't raise you to treat me this way," he'd snap, or he'd launch into a lecture about his sacrifices. But the more he argued, the more dismissive they became. It was a losing battle. He was trying to demand what can't be forced. Then, one day, Frank decided to try something different. Instead of reacting with frustration, he leaned into listening. When his daughter cut him off, he'd pause, nod, and say, "Go ahead, I'll wait." When his son dismissed his input, he'd respond calmly, "That's your call, but here's what I've learned." He stopped chasing their acknowledgement with words and started embodying the respect he sought. Speaking with measured wisdom, refusing to stoop to their level, carrying himself like a man who didn't need to prove his worth. It wasn't about winning an argument, it was about showing them what respect looked like through his actions. The change didn't happen overnight. At first, his kids barely noticed, too caught up in their habits. But over weeks, then months, they began to shift. They stopped talking over him as often. They'd ask, "What do you think, Dad?" in a tone that carried curiosity, not mockery. Why? Because Frank had stopped begging for respect and started living it. His presence, steady, composed, unshaken, spoke louder than any lecture ever could. His children saw a man who didn't need their validation to know his value, and that quiet confidence drew their respect naturally. You can apply this too. The next time your children disregard you, resist the urge to argue. Take a breath, hold your ground, and respond with calm assurance. If they interrupt, say, "I'll finish my thought first, then I'd love to hear yours." If they scoff at your advice, let it go with a simple, "I've said my piece, you decide what's best." Don't engage in a tug of war for their attention. Instead, model the respect you want by respecting yourself. Keep your tone steady, your words thoughtful, your posture grounded. It's not about silencing them. It's about showing them that your voice matters, whether they agree or not. Over time, they'll feel the weight of your dignity, and it'll inspire them to mirror it back to you. This approach requires patience and self-control, qualities that might feel tested when emotions run high. But it's worth it. Respect earned through presence outlasts any temporary win from a shouting match. Frank's kids didn't just stop dismissing him. They started seeking his counsel, drawn to the strength he radiated. You have that same potential. Lead with example, not conflict, and watch how they follow. Step 3. Reduce emotional reliance. One of the toughest lessons to learn as a parent, especially as your children grow into adults and your role in their daily lives diminishes, is that you can't rely on them to fill your emotional cup. You love them with a depth that's hard to put into words, and it's only natural to want that love returned, to feel their respect and affection as a balm for the sacrifices you've made. But here's the catch. The moment they sense that you need them to feel whole, valued, or complete, the dynamic shifts, and not in your favor. It's a subtle but profound truth about human relationships. People, even your own flesh and blood, tend to respect those who stand emotionally independent. When you lean too heavily on your children for validation or companionship, it can create an unintended burden. They might not articulate it, but they feel the pressure, the expectation that they're responsible for your happiness or sense of purpose. Instead of drawing them closer, this can push them away. They might withdraw, respond with impatience, or even grow irritated, not because they don't care, but because they sense an obligation they didn't sign up for. And the more you pursue their affection to fill that void, the less freely they offer it. Let me tell you about Helen, a kind-hearted mother whose story illustrates this beautifully. After her kids moved out and started their own families, Helen found herself adrift. She'd been the glue of her household for decades, and with that role fading, she turned to her children for connection. She'd call them frequently, leaving voicemails if they didn't pick up. "Just checking in, I miss you." She'd reminisce about the old days, hinting at how she wished they'd visit more often. When they did call, she'd cling to every minute, asking when she'd see them next. Her intentions were pure. She adored them and wanted to stay close. But her approach had the opposite effect. Her kids began dodging her calls, their responses growing curt. "Mom, I'm busy, I'll call you later." She felt the distance widening and couldn't understand why. Then Helen had an epiphany. She realized she'd been waiting for them to give her life meaning, and it was draining them, and her. So she made a bold shift. She stopped calling first. Instead, she poured her energy into herself, rediscovering passions she'd shelved years ago. She joined a gardening club where she found joy in tending plants and chatting with new friends. She signed up for a painting class, surprising herself with her knack for watercolors. She even took short trips with a group of retirees, marveling at how alive she felt exploring new places. Helen stopped orbiting her children's lives and built one of her own. The result was astonishing. After a few weeks of her silence, her son called, "Mom, what's going on? You've been so quiet." Her daughter texted, "Are you okay? I saw your painting on Facebook. When did you start that?" They weren't just checking in out of duty. They were curious, intrigued by this vibrant woman who didn't need them to thrive. When they visited, their conversations felt lighter, more genuine. They started respecting her time, her space, because she'd shown them she had a full life beyond them. Helen didn't demand their attention, she earned it by letting go of her dependence. You can take this lesson to heart. If you feel your children pulling away, ask yourself, are you leaning on them too much? It's not about cutting them off emotionally, it's about finding your own footing. Start small, pick up a hobby that excites you. Maybe it's knitting, hiking, or learning a language. Connect with friends or join a community group where you can share laughs and stories. Fill your days with moments that light you up, independent of your kids' involvement. When you talk to them, let it be from a place of strength, not need. I had the best day at my book club. How's your week going? Show them you're not waiting by the phone, you're living. This shift might feel lonely at first, especially if you're used to them being your anchor. But it's liberating. Helen's kids didn't just call more, they admired her resilience, her spark. When you stand tall on your own, your children see you not as an obligation, but as a person they want to know. A person they respect for her independence. Try it. The less you need them to feel complete, the more they'll value the space you occupy in their lives. Step 4. Establish and uphold boundaries. A major reason children, especially adult children, lose respect for their parents is painfully simple. They're allowed to. If you let them speak to you rudely, dismiss your feelings, or treat your time as disposable, they'll keep doing it. This isn't because they're heartless or malicious, it's human nature. People, even those closest to us, tend to treat us according to the standards we accept. Without clear boundaries, disrespect becomes a habit, not a choice. And every time you tolerate it, you reinforce that it's okay. Setting boundaries doesn't mean starting a war or pushing your kids away. It's about defining, with calm clarity, what you will and won't accept. And then holding that line consistently. It's an act of self-respect that teaches them to respect you in turn. Too often, parents shy away from this, fearing conflict or rejection. It's not worth the fight, they tell themselves, or I don't want to drive them away. But here's the irony. Avoiding boundaries doesn't preserve peace. It erodes your dignity, and over time, their regard for you. Consider Robert, a retired businessman who'd built a successful career on discipline and confidence. In his professional life, he'd been a leader, respected, decisive, unflinching. But with his adult children, he struggled. They'd interrupt him mid-story, scoff at his suggestions, or criticize his choices, how he spent his money, what he ate, even where he parked his car. At first, Robert let it slide. They're just busy, he'd reason, or I don't want to make a fuss. But the more he tolerated it, the worse it got. He felt invisible in his own family, a shadow of the man he'd been. One day, Robert reached a breaking point. His son cut him off during a conversation about a family trip, snapping, "Dad, that's a terrible idea. Let's just do it my way." Instead of staying quiet, Robert responded, "I'm going to finish what I was saying. When you're ready to listen, I'll continue." His tone was steady, not angry, just firm. His son blinked, caught off guard, but nodded. Later, when his daughter brushed off his concerns about her late-night calls, he said, "You don't have to agree, but I expect you to speak to me with respect. If you can't, we'll talk another time." And when they tested him, raising their voices or ignoring his limits, he followed through, calmly stepping away. "I'll be here when you're ready to have a real conversation." At first, his kids resisted. They weren't used to this version of their father, one who wouldn't bend. There were tense moments, a few huffy silences, but Robert held firm, not out of stubbornness, but self-worth. Over time, something shifted. His son stopped interrupting, listening instead of rushing to argue. His daughter softened her tone, even apologizing once. "I didn't mean to come off that way, Dad." They began to see him as a man who valued himself enough to demand civility, and that earned their respect. You can do this too. Start by identifying what bothers you most. Maybe it's their sharp tone, their habit of canceling plans last minute, or their tendency to take without giving back. Then set a boundary. If they snap at you, try, "I'm happy to talk, but not when you're speaking to me like that." If they disregard your time, say, "I need notice if we're making plans. Let's try again next time." Keep it simple, direct, and calm. No lectures, no guilt trips. The key is enforcement. If they cross the line, don't just complain, act. End the call, leave the room, pause the interaction. We'll pick this up when it's respectful. It's not punishment, it's clarity. This takes courage, especially if you're conflict-averse. Your kids might push back, test your resolve, but consistency pays off. Robert's family didn't transform overnight, but his steady boundaries reshaped their dynamic. They stopped seeing him as a pushover and started treating him as an equal. If your children don't respect you, ask, are you allowing it? Draw your line in the sand, they won't do it for you. And when you stand up for yourself, they'll rise to meet you. Step 5. Don't give without recognition. One of the fastest ways to lose respect is to keep giving your time, your energy, your support to people who don't acknowledge it. As parents, we're wired to provide, often without expecting anything in return. It's a beautiful instinct, born from love. But when that giving becomes a one-way street, when your efforts are met with indifference, entitlement, or even complaints, it doesn't build closeness, it undermines your value. Your children stop seeing your generosity as a gift and start treating it as their right. And that shift erodes respect. This happens more often than we admit. You might drive across town to help with a move, only to hear, "You parked too far away." You offer advice or a loan, and they take it without a thank you, expecting more next time. You rearrange your life to fit their needs, and they barely notice until you can't, and then they're annoyed. The pattern is clear. When you give without appreciation, you don't foster gratitude, you create expectation. They assume you'll always be there, always say yes. And the moment you don't, they're not thankful for what you've done. They're inconvenienced by what you won't. I knew a man named George, a father whose generosity defined him. He'd spent years supporting his kids, paying for college extras, fixing their cars, watching their pets during vacations. As they grew older, he kept giving. When his daughter needed rent money, he wired it. When his son's car broke down, he dropped everything to help. But gratitude was scarce. His daughter would say, "Thanks, but next time can you send it faster?" His son would grumble, "You took forever to get here." Worse, when George needed a hand, say a ride to the doctor, they were too busy. He felt used, invisible, a resource rather than a person. One day, George decided he'd had enough. He didn't lash out. He just changed his approach. He stopped offering help unasked. When his daughter hinted at money troubles, he said, "I'm here if you need to talk about it, but I can't keep bailing you out." When his son called about another car issue, he replied, "I've got my own plans today. Let me know how it goes." He started saying no when it made sense, not out of spite, but self-respect. At first, his kids were stunned, even frustrated. "Why are you being like this?" his daughter asked. But George held steady. "I love you, but my help isn't automatic. It's a choice." Over time, the dynamic shifted. His daughter thanked him when he did pitch in, aware it wasn't guaranteed. His son offered to help with George's yard work, a gesture he'd never made before. They began to see his giving as valuable because it wasn't endless. George learned a vital lesson. Generosity without appreciation loses its power. When you tie your giving to respect, it regains its worth. Apply this in your life. If your kids take your efforts for granted, pause, ask, "Am I giving more than they value?" Next time they expect something, your time, money, energy, hold back unless they show appreciation. Say, "I'm happy to help when it's noticed," or "Let's figure this out together. I'm not just a fix." If they complain, stay firm. "I give because I care, not because I have to." It's not about withholding love. It's about teaching them your worth. George's kids didn't just respect him more, they cherished him. Scale back and watch how they step up. Step 6. Create a life beyond them. One of the most potent ways to regain your children's respect is to show them your world doesn't revolve around them. As parents, we naturally make our kids the center of our universe, raising them, cheering them on, orbiting their milestones. But as they grow and you age, that focus can backfire. If your happiness, purpose, or identity hinges on their attention, they might start seeing you as someone with little else to offer. A figure defined by them, not yourself. People respect those who live fully, who have their own passions and pursuits. When your children sense you're waiting for them to fill your days, they may feel smothered, or worse, pity you instead of admire you. Eleanor, a widow in her late 70s, learned this firsthand. After her husband died, she turned to her adult children for meaning. She'd call daily, offer unsolicited advice, ask when they'd visit, hoping to stay central in their lives, but it strained their bond. Her son's visits dwindled, her daughter's calls grew brief, clipped. Eleanor felt lonelier than ever, wondering why her love pushed them away. Then she made a choice. She stopped clinging and started living. She joined a book club, losing herself in novels and debates. She traveled with friends, marveling at new sights. She volunteered, finding purpose in helping others. Her children were no longer her sole focus. She was. The change was remarkable. Her son called one day, "Mom, you're so busy. What's this book club about?" Her daughter visited, curious. "You seem different. Happy." They weren't filling her void, they were drawn to her vitality. Eleanor's independence earned their respect. They saw her as a woman with a rich life, not a parent waiting in the wings. Do this for yourself. Build a life that excites you. Join a class, volunteer, travel, reconnect with friends. Show your kids you're thriving, not just surviving. When they see you as a whole person, not an extension of them, they'll respect you anew. Eleanor's kids did, and yours can too. Respect isn't demanded, it's inspired. If your children treat you with less regard, don't waste energy on anger. Shift your approach. Stop chasing approval, lead with dignity, ease reliance, set boundaries, give with purpose, and live fully. They'll see you not as a need to be met, but a person to be valued. Try it. Your respect awaits.